Hello and welcome to Fit to Speak. I'm Eugene Obah. So glad to have you with us. Fall is here, and so are we in College Park, Maryland, where it's been a month since the fall semester began, and sadly, there seems to be no end in sight for the novel coronavirus. The University of Maryland was one of the first universities in the United States that had the foresight to require everybody to be vaccinated, otherwise, don't even bother showing up. I've been examining how things are really going in the first semester back in the COVID era, and I'll be reporting on these developments in a few minutes. And later in the show, I speak with Common Sense Entertainment Creative Director Raheem Dawodu Jr. about the 2020 census numbers and what they mean going forward for this country. We've got quite a bit to get to, so let's begin. We'll get back to College Park, Maryland in a little bit, but first, while I may not be able to possess the musical talents of Nicki Minaj, such as they are, let's also thank our lucky stars that I have absolutely zero talent in making nutty claims about the COVID vaccine. I'm also glad not to be in Lynchburg, Virginia, the home of Liberty University, because as you may have heard, that university had a campus-wide quarantine after 159 COVID cases were reported among their campus community in late August. There's no vaccine mandate on their campus, although once the cases spiked, they offered vaccines. It's also too bad that copy editors are apparently not required at the Hill, but I digress. Let me emphasize again that Liberty University hasn't got a vaccine mandate, and the case bank that I mentioned just a few seconds ago was worse than 4 other universities in Virginia put together. I recall advising some folks who had issue with the vaccine mandates at the University of Maryland and other places that they could perhaps transfer to Liberty University, where I guess they'll have the liberty to infect others. And those that continue to not roll up their sleeve for the greater good of our populace are actually depriving people of their right to life, as evidenced by the fact that some non COVID patients are being turned away from hospitals because the beds are filled. Howard Stern's recent comments on his radio show are completely and utterly on point. Of course, I wish I could repeat them, but this is a family show. Maybe we should require the powers that be over at Liberty University to read Matthew chapter 22, verse 39, and let's see if they really believe what that scripture says. I'll wait. Last year, college looked very different. Lush lawns were deserted in college campuses across the country, and the lecture hall was Zoom. All that has changed thanks to the rollout of the vaccine, and I had the opportunity to be here in College Park in the first day of classes, and you'll be able to see that video exclusively on our Instagram page in the first week of October. But I have to tell you, quite candidly, from what I was able to glean from all of the festivities and everything else, the energy and excitement, it seemed that for better or worse, the life on the college campus was back to relative normal, including those pesky scooter drivers. This Reddit post, by the way, perfectly encapsulates my sentiments. One of the other things that's important to note is that this relative normalcy is only possible because nearly 100% of students, faculty, and staff are vaccinated, but 79 students were disenrolled for not meeting compliance. Just as an aside, no word on whether or not they took my earlier advice to attend Liberty University. Maybe they got extra credit, who knows. But in all seriousness, had there not been a high percentage of folks here that were vaccinated, stuff like what happened in February of this year could happen on a much larger scale. The rollout of the vaccine seemingly cannot come soon enough, as I was not terribly surprised to read that yet another dorm on the University of Maryland campus earlier this month had to go into enhanced health precautions. This time, the residents of La Plata Hall had to restrict their activities for 10 days or just go home, wherever that is. They also could not attend in-person classes, among other restrictions, and they, of course, had to be tested for the virus. This amid a 2-day spike in cases on campus. It was announced that starting February 20th until just at least 1 day shy of the end of the month, that students in all residence halls must sequester in place. They can only go to the student union to test for the virus or to get food, though they can also go to the dining halls to get food if they wish, or if they dare. All classes were held virtually, labs were continued with social distancing, of course, and Wacomico Hall, a residence hall on campus, was open to add capacity for any student who tests positive for the virus, and more space may open if the need arises. Keep in mind that the impetus for this was the fact that 95 cases were reported on campus between Valentine's Day and February 20th, and the positivity rate was 1.7%. And if that weren't bad enough, the day after the restrictions were put in place, 49 cases were reported on campus, the highest of the spring semester and of the academic year. And looking at testing, it was recently announced that those who are asymptomatic can be tested for COVID on campus, reversing a previous policy that only allowed unvaccinated people to be tested. Additionally, the university distributed 50,000 KN95 masks, which, as a reminder, filter out 95% of particles in the air, provided that they are approved by the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, aka NIOSH. Folks, despite the normalcy, relative normalcy that is on campus in which nearly everybody is vaccinated, remember that the vaccination rate in Prince George's County, where the University of Maryland is based, is still quite a bit lower. And we also must remember that sadly, COVID will now hold the record of having killed more Americans than the flu pandemic of 1918. As the conversation continues about the role of college in the COVID era and what that looks like in a post pandemic era, whenever that happens, one thing that will remain constant is that having an educated populace is essential to the functioning of our society. Intellectual lightweights like Donald Trump, Nicki Minaj, and others of their ilk represent the slow embrace of stupidity in this country by certain segments of our populace. It is alarming. I urge all college students watching this program to resist the urge to embrace vacuous celebrity. One area that you can guarantee that intelligence will always be embraced is right here on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/the CSE channel. And while I cannot be certain that you'll get extra credit on your midterm later this semester or an A on that 10-page paper that's due tomorrow, I can guarantee that the only way that you'll be the first to see our videos is if you subscribe and ring the bell. Tell your friends and even your roommate and spread the word, not the virus. And joining me now is Raheem Dawodu Jr., the creative director of Common Sense Entertainment. Raheem, welcome. It is nice to have you on the program. And let's go ahead and get started. All right. And by the way, even though we are in the fall now, I'm glad to see that you're still bringing the summer vibes. Looks like you're in the Bahamas, and all.
Yeah,
So
man, I need to be out here and somewhere beachy, even though it's getting cooler. So got to remember the good times of the summer. So yeah.
exactly. Want to still, enjoy those uh, positive summer vibes, even though now we're in the new season. It's
Right.
now a little colder here at the DMV, but hey, it's still very, very good stuff. And I hope you're enjoying yourself over here. The census numbers
Hmm.
that were released this past summer. And really, we're seeing a rapidly diversifying America. We're really, really seeing it. And this chart from the Washington Post really starkly lays that out. And 6 states in the District of Columbia, including most recently Nevada and Maryland, are majority minority.
Hmm.
Um, what does this mean for our society, Raheem, or really doesn't mean anything for the U.S. society?
It's a show that um America is becoming a different country than what it has been. The fact that there are many states now that are becoming majority minority, it shows that these people from different countries, people from different backgrounds are now like getting more influence in these places. More cultural stuff. If you go to Florida, for instance, or even actually in Maryland, for instance, if you go to certain parts of Maryland in PG County, where I'm from, which I think had like a huge turn. I think it went up. The Latino population went up, which was formerly like one of the blackest county in the country. Yeah, it's cool. Like it's cool that this country is now changing, and there's more people from different backgrounds being able to express themselves. You go, like I said, in PG County, you go to certain neighborhoods or communities in PG County, and storefronts are in Spanish, signs are in Spanish, but along with English as well. And I think that's cool. I don't have any problems with that whatsoever. That's actually like a great thing for this country, for to see like a growing like Spanish speaking population. Also, you're seeing a lot of like Black people moving to different parts of the country as well that they hadn't been before. A stronger Asian population, particularly like East Asian and South Asian. So that's all like really like good. Will it change things in America? That remains to be seen. That means that what you have in America is that people kind of come in here and want to assimilate into the culture and try to become like whatever quote unquote American is. And usually, what American means is whatever white people think America is. And so, when you had that in mind, does that mean that the dominant white culture that's been the dominant thing in America, does that change, or does that mean that we kind of like or does that mean that there's going to be more of a burgeoning like culture from different elements of the world that's coming into America now? That's the question that remains to be seen. I personally think that over the last like at least in my lifetime, I've seen like things change from like beauty standards to the way people dress, words that are like entering dictionary now, things along those sorts of the way schooling is and so forth. It's changed, but it also really depends on where you live in the country. So if you live in a city, I think you're seeing a lot of city and suburbs of major cities change. But is it then you like kind of go to some states? I think like Phoenix was one, or Arizona is one state, for example, where it's gotten whiter, and there are some states where it's gotten whiter. That's the question that I guess we need to like ask ourselves, like you know there is a definite change on the coast and in major cities, but uh, it feels like a lot of other parts of America it's gotten a lot whiter, and there's an issue, isn't there? There's something going on there, so that's something to kind of like consider when we're having these conversations.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm going to get to that, especially with what some of the interesting stuff that's going on here in the DMV in
Hmm.
just a second. But one of the interesting stuff that I want to look into as well with this is that what about the political aspect of it?
Hmm.
Should for instance, the Republican Party, if I look at the exit polls in the last election,
Hmm.
the previous U.S. President Donald Trump, he won the white vote with, which made up 67% of the electorate, and there's so many results there that
Hmm.
indicate that he won very, very strongly with white people, especially those that do not have a college degree. What kind of stuff should we be looking at with this as far as politically? I know in the November edition of the program, you talked quite a bit about gerrymandering and
Hmm.
what role that may play, especially as we head into the midterms next year and everything else. So, what do you make of that?
Well, that's a good thing you brought up with Donald Trump winning the white vote. I think I don't think Democratic presidents have won the white vote since, I want to say, is it Jimmy Carter or LBJ? I got to look that up. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think that Democrats have not won the white vote since like, I want to say it was LBJ, but I'm not 100% certain there. But that just has been like a lost thing for the Democratic Party for a while. But the overwhelming numbers that you're pointing out for white voters supporting Trump is probably greater than it's been in a very very long time, probably since Reagan. Um, or yeah, actually probably Bush Jr. actually. But to go back to your point about political stuff, the Republican Party's been like, they've known the demographic changes have been happening for a very very long time in this country, and they started seeing that in the 80s and so forth, and so uh, they've been doing a couple things. They've been welcoming. They've After like except like the last few years, but even then, there's still people coming in there. They've been welcoming like other minorities into the party, into the fold. There's like an uptick of like black conservatives in the 80s. They've been slowly like trying to assimilate like Latinos into the Republican Party fold. Again, like I said before, the dominant culture in this country is white people and white culture and stuff, and so people want to assimilate to that culture to feel American, and the Republicans have done a job of like making themselves representative of the white culture and stuff, and this is what we're white people, and this is what we are, the party of white people. That's what they've been doing, even though I think both parties are the party of white people, but um, but I think that but to go back to your question with gerrymandering, they've been doing this for about 40 some odd years. They've been slowly passing laws making it harder for people of color to vote, pretty much since Reagan was in charge. I know people are like upset now about what's going on in Georgia, but I think it was like 2018 where people were in long lines waiting to vote in certain urban centers around Georgia as well because of laws that were passed like in the early part of the tens, early part of the 10th decade. Voter ID laws that have been happening across the country. These things, this has been a movement for a very long time. Republicans have actually gotten kind of ahead of to enact different laws to make it harder for people to vote, especially people of color. What that means is that what you're seeing is a lot more of a minority rule in a lot of different places. There's a lot of and when I say minority, I mean the states that are less populous but mostly white have been gaining more control over U.S. political discourse versus like the majority of states. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but I think like 65 or 70% of Americans in the U.S. Senate is only represented by like 30 or 30 senators, where it's like a small minority of the country has a dominant control over the Senate. That's a problem. And that's something that this country is going to have to rectify with coming going forward. And I don't know what that means or what that looks like, but uh, that's going to be something that people are going to be upset about, and it's going to come to a head soon because you can't have a nation where uh, laws are being halted because uh, 20, I mean 30% of the country has an outsized influence over the rest of the nation. That's not a good thing at all. And people are going to be upset about that. But we'll see. Hoping for there's a good solution to that, and that we come together and figure that. But the way that this nation has been going, it's becoming more and more polarized. We just got to hope and see that things are positive. But that's going to come to a head very soon, I think.
I think that definitely the historical context that you mentioned is very, very good because there was a guy, Paul Weyrich, the late Paul Weyrich of the American Legislative Exchange Council, but better known as ALEC. And I want to actually play a soundbite of what he said for our viewers, and here that is.
Now, many of our Christians have what I call the goo-goo syndrome, good government. They want everybody to vote. I don't want everybody to vote. Elections are not won by a majority of people. They never have been from the beginning of our country, and they are not now. As a matter of fact, our leverage in the elections, quite candidly, goes up as the voting populace goes down.
So that has always been kind of sort of in the historical part of it has been kind of in that fight has always been kind of baked into the cake of the Republican
Hmm.
ideology in terms of the voter suppression, stuff. But I think, really what you've said with what got on in Georgia with Stacey Abrams and everything else. Um, I think the results of the Georgia Senate the runoffs earlier this year were kind of sort of an omen of of this changing population, and same thing with the results in November. That this was kind of sort of an omen of what was going to happen because again of the changing demographics that I think led to this. And what I think is that but what's interesting is that those Georgia Senate runoffs, they, as I mentioned in the January edition of the program, Republicans, they could have won that those races. They could have won, those races, but the problem is that they lacked a lot of focus, in this stuff. They were too focused on again, putting up all of these roadblocks and things of that nature, instead of, again, providing some level of ideas, and
Hmm.
all of that. So I think it says a lot there about okay where things may kind of sort of head. I mean,
I think I personally I think Arizona is the best example of it. Like in Georgia, for instance, I think that was just a great get out the vote effort in that state. To bring people, that was just a great on the floor, on the ground campaign to make people register, get them out the vote and stuff, especially during the Senate runoff, which is usually not a high turnout event at all. But in Arizona, this is a state that's a lot of people have like it's one of the fastest growing states in the country, and a lot of like white people moved to Arizona over the last 40 some odd years, and that's like a strong like Greg Goldwater, John McCain, and so forth. And the Latino and First Nations population were a big determinant in that state to win that election, which uh, hasn't really gotten the coverage it deserved on a national standpoint. But that was like the big thing that like won that election. And Arizona is like a really really red state. So for that to happen, that was like the biggest shock. And I think they've passed laws in Arizona as well to try to like limit people on reservations to vote there as well. So that was like the one to me that shocked the heck out of me was Arizona because that is a red state. And for the work that the local activists and Democratic Party did there to get people out to vote was like in those communities out the vote was like tremendous. And that's like to me the big red barometer of like, all right, we have to do something about this because they're realizing that these people that are minorities and we've oppressed for a very long time realizing they had political power. And now they're like, let's now we have to like make sure they oppress them even more. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was the one that shocked that out of me was Arizona.
And that certainly shocked Fox News as well, if you recall. I
Hmm.
mean,
Hmm.
it almost caused a bit of a coronary
Yeah,
over
yeah,
there in terms of
yeah,
calling it. So it was a sight to behold right
yeah.
there. Um, Looking back to the DMV in our kind of sort of in our remaining moments here, I want to take a
Hmm.
look at this chart from the Washington Post that explains some of the stuff that's been going on in
Hmm.
some of this part of the region here. So in Howard County and in Fairfax County, Virginia, in Howard County, Maryland, you have the white population since the 2000 census
Hmm.
go down from 73 to 47%. And in
Hmm.
Fairfax County, you've got this white population going down from 64% to 47%. But then in DC,
Hmm.
you had the white population go up from 28% to 38%.
Right.
What factors do you think, Raheem, are influencing that? Why is it that really that these two jurisdictions that I just read, the population's going down, but then in DC, the white population's been going up since 2000.
Hmm.
Is gentrification playing a role in that, or are there other factors that we need to look at here?
Well, I think that in Howard and Fairfax, the again, the Latino Hispanic population is the one that's risen in those jurisdictions by a lot. I think look at the chart in 2000, for instance, Howard County had the Asian population has grown a lot. So in 2000, I think that maybe 5% was in Howard County, and now it's 20% in Howard County, which is kind of like a crazy like jump and stuff. Fairfax, the Latino and Hispanic population have both jumped up like tremendously since like 2000. So I think that's like the big thing to look at is that those communities, there's been a big there's been a sort of big boost in population, but that's because a lot of like people from the Latino, the Hispanic, and Asian populations have come in and lived in those jurisdictions over the last 20 years. So that's like tremendous to see that. In DC, I think you're right regarding gentrification. Though there's been like an upswing in like Hispanic population in DC, there's been a huge the white population is probably going to get the plurality of DC citizens by the 2030 census if things are trending the way they are. And that's kind of like staggering to think about considering it used to be capital city for most of our lives. To see now that the white it's going to be a white plurality of people in DC and stuff, and that has to do with what's going on with the city over the last 20 years. There's been a deal in government to kind of like weed out a lot of lower income housing, a lot of poor communities, and replace those homes with like uh, ugly condos and ugly high rises that offer no culture or character to the city and stuff, but are just there for developers to come in and charge crazy high rates for people to move into, and thus like getting more people out of more people that can't afford to live there out of the city. That's going on in all cities across the country, but I think DC is one of the areas where you're shocked at how in 10, 15 years a neighborhood looks like this and now it looks completely different. Um, you can go down to like Pennsylvania Avenue in Southeast near the Capitol, Capitol Hill. That's like one community that's like changed dramatically. 8th Street. I vividly remember as when I was in college going to 8th Street to see go to the Atlas Theater, and there wasn't any building larger than like 2 stories on 8th Street when you're like going down that bridge from Union Station to 8th Street to hang out and stuff. And there wasn't really that many establishments for people to hang out at and do stuff. And there definitely wasn't um, uh, condos and high-rise apartment buildings that were charging $2,400, $2,500 of rent and stuff. Now you go down there, and the first 2 buildings you see are these huge high-rise apartment buildings that are down there, and
You got a
high-rise
Whole Foods over
condos.
there.
What's that?
You got a Whole Foods over there.
You got a Whole Foods over there now. Exactly. You have a Whole Foods in this area and stuff. And so when you cross, you look over, and it's just like a completely different topography than it was. Like I said, when I was in college, like 15 years ago, let alone like other parts of the city where people are, been forced to move out because of property taxes and lost their homes because of that, and thus people are come in, bought homes for low value, either sell it or they're doing the other thing where they're gutting the insides out and now making those homes like 2 or 3 story apartments for people to live in and pay again really high rent for. Um, Excuse me. This has been going on all over the country, but DC is the one area where you're kind of like seeing this like really explode. 14th Street's another example. Columbia Heights all the way down to like Logan Circle, just completely different from what it was 10 years ago. And that's very concerning because the thing that attracted a lot of people into these cities, and not in DC, but like in New York and Oakland, which is in the Bay Area, which if you've gone down there, you've seen that yourselves. Austin, Texas. What's attracted people to these areas was that flavor, that culture that was there, that was created by the Black residents that had been there, or the residents of any race really, but primarily Black residents that had been there, and that attracts people into it, and then they stamp it out and create like like some stuffy like Upper West Side culture that no one likes and everybody tries to flee from. So yeah, it's very concerning that this is all happening in DC and in major cities across the country, and you just hope that like there's something legislative that could be done to stop this. But I feel like that train's probably already passed now.
Yeah,
it's going to keep seeing that go backwards.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, what can be done? Can anything be done really about the issues of gentrification here in the DC area and elsewhere? You'll get Raheem's answer to that in a future edition of Fit to Speak. Finally, it has been a little over 20 years since the events of September 11th here in the United States, tragic events of September 11th, and at the same time frame, the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan. There's been a lot of talk about the implications of this pullout, so I want you to join us on our Instagram page. I want you to follow us there. We are at CSE_media, because this evening, yes, tonight at 7:30 p.m. Eastern, we will have an exclusive segment that is an IGTV exclusive segment on all of this with Raheem. I hope you'll be able to join us. And thank you so much for watching. Listen, there's going to be a lot more where that came from, so you better stay tuned to catch it all. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on all of our social media accounts for more information, including all of the bonus content that you'll see from today's show. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell on our YouTube channel so that you do not miss any of our episodes. And until next time, I'm Eugene Obah, and remember, we will not be silenced.